If you can fit into that dress, I'll marry you on the spot. If you can fit into that dress, I'll marry you on the spot.
Mary Williams learned early that rooms made decisions about her before she ever opened her mouth. It was never subtle. The pause when she entered. The way conversations bent around her body, like water around a stone. The looks that arrived in pairs, first at her face, then at the space she occupied. She had grown up inside that awareness like a second skeleton. Still, nothing prepared her for the ballroom. Welcome to Black Stories Hub. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for the support. Stay tuned for daily stories that echo beyond words, and don't forget to subscribe. The Westbridge Grand was not a hotel so much as a declaration. Its chandeliers hung low and heavy, as if they had been lowered to remind people where the light came from. The walls were wrapped in cream-colored silk. The air smelled like money and citrus and something faintly metallic, champagne flutes clinking, laughter sharpening into edges. Mary stood just inside the service corridor, a gray cleaning cart beside her, her gloved hands folded neatly over a mop handle. The uniform clung to her body in a way that made her acutely aware of every curve. Faded blue. Polyester. A name tag she had almost taken off before her shift. Mary W. She had left it on. The event was a private fashion gala. Designers, investors, socialites. People who spoke with their hands and never looked at price tags. Mary had worked events like this before. Weddings. Conferences. Once, a political fundraiser where the security was tighter than the smiles. But tonight was different. Tonight, the centerpiece hung in the center of the room like a dare. The dress. Black and sculpted. Sharp lines that caught the light and held it hostage. It wasn't delicate. It didn't flutter. It stood. The kind of dress that didn't ask permission to exist. It had been designed to be admired from a distance, and feared up close. Mary had overheard the staff whispering earlier. Charles Belloc's masterpiece. Belloc was already holding court near the bar. He was tall with silver-threaded hair. A glass of wine balanced loosely in his fingers, like he could drop it and never worry about the spill. People laughed before he finished sentences. Some laughed before he even spoke. Mary wasn't watching him. She had learned that lesson. Watching invited trouble. But trouble found her anyway. It started with a voice. Smooth, amused, sharpened by confidence. Well, Charles Belloc said, just loudly enough to carry, if she can fit into that dress, I'll marry her on the spot. The room reacted before Mary did. Laughter burst out like fireworks. Very sharp and immediate. A few people gasped, not in disapproval but in delight. Someone clapped once, then stopped when they realized no one else was. Mary felt the sound before she understood the words. She lifted her eyes. Belloc was looking directly at her. So were dozens of others. She stood frozen, mop still in her hands, her cart half blocking the service corridor like a failed attempt at invisibility. The spotlight, actual, literal, hung above the dress and spilled outward, catching her in its reach. For a brief, surreal moment, it felt as though the room had tilted, aligning her body with the object of the joke. The dress. Her body. The comparison. Belloc smiled, slow and indulgent, as if he had done something generous. What? He added lightly. Don't have the guts? More laughter. Louder now. More confident. Mary's ears rang. She didn't respond. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She didn't do any of the things people expected fat women to do when humiliated, didn't turn it into performance, didn't give them the satisfaction of visible pain. Instead, she lowered her gaze. Not in shame. In calculation. She took one step back. Then another. Her shoes squeaked faintly against the marble. She turned, pushed her cart gently into the corridor, and disappeared from the room. Behind her, the laughter swelled. Someone said, "Too easy." Someone else said, "He's awful," and laughed anyway. Mary kept walking until the sound dulled, then faded, then disappeared entirely. Only then did she stop. She stood in the narrow service hallway, her back against the wall, her chest rising and falling too fast. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. What settled into her wasn't sadness. It was something colder. Something clean. She had been crushed before. This wasn't new. But repetition did something strange to pain. It stripped it of theatrics. Left behind clarity. Bone-deep clarity. She finished her shift without incident. No one apologized. No one mentioned it. One of the event coordinators handed her a folded napkin with half a slice of cake on it near the end of the night, whispering, "You can take this," as if generosity required secrecy. Mary thanked her and threw it away later. At home, the apartment greeted her with silence. South Phoenix at night hummed faintly through the cracked window. Sirens in the distance. A neighbor's TV murmuring through thin walls. The ceiling above her bed held a long, jagged line, old water damage that had never been repaired. It looked like a fault line. Her mother sat at the small kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug that had lost its handle years ago. "You're late," her mother said softly. Event ran long. Her mother studied her face. She always did. As if searching for bruises that didn't show up on skin. "Did you eat?" "I will." Mary poured herself coffee, though it was nearly midnight. Cheap grounds. Bitter. She drank it black. The TV flickered on in the corner. "Last night's gala made waves across the fashion world," the anchor said brightly. Designer Charles Bellick unveiled what many are calling his most daring piece yet, a black gown rumored to fetch millions at private auction. The image flashed on screen. The dress. Mary froze, mug halfway to her mouth. Her mother followed her gaze. "You were there?" she said. It wasn't a question. Mary didn't answer. The screen replayed Bellick laughing, his arm draped casually around a model who looked like she had been assembled by committee. The dress shimmered behind them. Mary reached out and turned off the TV. The room fell quiet again. "One day," she said almost to herself, "I'll wear something like that." Her mother didn't smile. Didn't discourage her. She only nodded. "Get some sleep," she said. Mary lay awake for hours. Not replaying the laughter. Replaying the room. The architecture of it. The way power moved. The way cruelty passed as entertainment. The way no one had needed to touch her to make her feel exposed. By morning she had made a decision. It wasn't loud. It didn't come with vows. At 5:30 a.m. the alarm screamed. Mary stared at the ceiling, the fault line above her head. She got up. The bus ride to work was the same as always. People talking about rent, groceries, overdue bills. Someone complaining about gas prices. A man asleep with his head against the window. Mary watched the city pass by. Gyms, clinics, billboards promising transformation in 30 days or less. She didn't feel envy. She felt hunger. Not for thinness. For dignity. After her shift ended, she didn't go home. She walked 3 blocks past her usual stop and stood in front of an old neighborhood gym wedged between a pawn shop and a closed-down hair salon. The sign was sun-faded. First week free. Change starts today. Mary stood there for a long time. Then she pushed the door open. The air inside smelled like iron and sweat and effort. No mirrors. No influencers. Just bodies working. A woman with broad shoulders and kind eyes approached her. "First time?" she asked. Mary nodded. "What are you looking for?" Mary swallowed. "My life back." The woman studied her, not with pity, not with judgment. With seriousness. "If you're honest," she said, "we can work." Mary stepped inside. The door closed behind her. Mary has entered a space that will demand everything from her, but the world that laughed at her is still intact, still powerful, still unaware that it has just lost control of the narrative. Mary Williams did not transform the way people expected. There was no montage set to music. No dramatic unveiling. No moment where the world suddenly decided she was worthy because her body had changed shape. Her body did not shrink. Her life expanded. The gym became a second home, not because it promised salvation but because it demanded honesty. The first weeks were brutal. Not physically, though her muscles screamed, but mentally. Mirrors were absent, which forced Mary to feel instead of judge. She learned the difference between pain that harms and pain that builds. Between exhaustion that drains and exhaustion that strengthens. She trained slow, methodical, ruthless in her consistency. By day she cleaned hotels. By night she lifted, pushed, pulled, learned. She learned how breath controlled power. How stance controlled balance. How presence could fill a room without apology. The trainer, Lena, never once suggested Mary needed to be smaller. "You don't need less of yourself," she said one night as Mary struggled through a set. "You need control of what you already have." That sentence rewired something. Months passed, then a year. Mary stopped missing days. Stopped explaining herself. Stopped arguing with doubt when it showed up at 2 a.m. Instead, she acknowledged it like weather. Present and temporary. Irrelevant to the work. Her mother noticed first. "You stand different," she said one morning over coffee. Mary smiled. She did. Not straighter but heavier. As if she had decided she belonged exactly where her feet landed. What began as training turned into study. Mary read everything, biomechanics, garment construction, inclusive design, supply chains. She learned why clothes failed bodies like hers, and why the industry blamed the bodies instead of the design. She started sketching at night. Not dresses meant to hide. Not silhouettes meant to beg forgiveness. Clothes that assumed space. Clothes that expected weight. Clothes that respected black bodies without translating them for white comfort. She called the idea anchor. Because anchors don't float to be accepted. They hold things steady. The first pieces were crude, self-funded, small runs. But when women tried them on, something happened that Mary recognized instantly. They exhaled. They stood taller. They didn't ask, does this make me look smaller? They asked, do you have this in another color? Word spread quietly. Not influencers. Not magazines. Women, word of mouth and trust. Anchor grew. 2 years after the ballroom, Mary received an invitation. Same hotel. Same ballroom. Private investor summit. She stared at the email for a long time. Then she accepted. The night of the event, Mary arrived early, not through the service corridor but the front doors. She wore a custom anchor gown. Black one. Architectural. Designed for her body, not in spite of it. The fabric moved when she moved, but it never begged attention. It assumed it. People turned. Not because she was thin. Because she was certain. Whispers followed her like echoes catching up late. Who is that? Is she someone important? She must be. Inside the ballroom, the chandeliers still hung low. The silk walls still glowed. The dress, that dress, no longer hung at the center. Fashion had moved on. Ego always did. Mary stood near the back as the host took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, thank you for joining us tonight. We are honored to welcome our keynote investor and founder of one of the fastest-growing independent fashion houses redefining modern design. Mary felt the room lean forward. Please welcome, the host continued, Mary Williams, founder of Anchor. Applause erupted. Real applause. Not polite. Not confused. Mary walked forward. She didn't rush. She didn't perform humility. She took the space the walk required. In the crowd, Charles Bellick froze. Recognition hit him slowly, then all at once. His smile faltered. His wine glass trembled just slightly enough. Mary reached the stage and turned to face the room. She waited. Silence followed. 2 years ago this room had laughed. Now it listened. I want to tell you a short story, Mary said calmly, about a woman who stood in a room like this and was told she didn't belong. A ripple passed through the audience. She didn't argue, Mary continued. She didn't defend herself. She didn't ask to be seen differently. She simply left. She paused. And she built something where her body, her skin, and her presence were never up for debate. The screen behind her lit up. Numbers, growth charts, contracts, testimonials. Not flashy. Just undeniable. Mary didn't look at them. She looked at the room. I'm not here to prove anything, she said. I'm here to make an offer. The investors leaned in. Anchor doesn't design for approval. We design for reality. For bodies that exist whether fashion is ready or not. She let that land. A woman who is mocked doesn't need to be rescued, Mary said softly. She needs the world to stop pretending her existence is a joke. No one laughed. Charles Bellick stood abruptly. This is inappropriate, he snapped. This event. Mary turned toward him. Not sharply. Not angrily. Simply fully. Charles, she said evenly, you once made a joke about who deserved to wear beauty. The room held its breath. You didn't know me, she continued, but you taught me something. She smiled, not with triumph, not with cruelty. Talent doesn't ask permission, and dignity doesn't wait to be invited. She turned back to the audience. Thank you for listening. Applause exploded. Not scattered. Not polite. Sustained. Charles Bellick walked out. No one followed. No one stopped him. No one looked back. Later that night, Mary stood in front of her mirror at home. She touched the fabric of her dress, not reverently but familiarly. This was never about proving I could fit, she whispered. It was about refusing to disappear. Her mother watched from the doorway, eyes wet, smiling. Mary met her reflection. Still black, still fat, still whole, and finally, untouchable. Because confidence is not granted. Worth is not negotiated. And no room gets to decide who belongs in it. If this story reminds you of the version of yourself the world once ignored, tap like and share it with someone who needs. Thank you for watching. And please, remember to like and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this. Your support makes this stories possible.
Jesus. Jesus.
They told her no. In under 10 minutes. Not because she lacked the qualifications. Not because the numbers didn't add up. But because the man behind the desk never believed a woman like her could be worth saving. She was a black single mother. Wearing borrowed confidence and worn shoes. Asking for help to save her son's life. The millionaire didn't raise his voice. Didn't insult her outright. He did something worse. He dismissed her. What he didn't know was that the technology funding his empire, the innovation hanging his name on buildings, came from her mind. And when he finally opened the file, when he finally read the name he had ignored, everything he thought he owned began to unravel. Welcome to Black Stories Hub. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for the support. Stay tuned for daily stories that echo beyond words, and don't forget to subscribe. The glass tower rose out of the city like a monument to certainty. Steel, marble, and tinted windows reflected a version of the world that believed it had already won. Inside, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and filtered citrus, an intentional choice, meant to calm investors, intimidate petitioners, and reassure those who made decisions worth millions with the flick of a pen. The Thompson Foundation headquarters did not feel like a place where lives were saved. It felt like a place where lives were evaluated. On the 34th floor, in the outer waiting area just beyond the executive offices, a woman sat quietly in a chair that was slightly too low for the table beside it. Her name was Alicia Lewis. She sat with her back straight, hands folded over a worn leather folder resting on her lap. The folder had been opened and closed too many times, its edges softened by use. Inside were documents she had memorized: hospital bills, scholarship transcripts, legal affidavits, letters of recommendation, and one letter she hadn't read in weeks because it hurt too much to reread. She wore a simple navy dress and low black shoes. Nothing expensive. Nothing careless. Her hair was pulled back neatly, not because anyone had told her to, but because she'd learned long ago that neatness was often mistaken for worth. Alicia had arrived 30 minutes early. She always did. Across the room, a pair of assistants whispered over tablets. Their voices stayed low, their glances brief. To them, Alicia was neither important nor important, just scheduled. She didn't look nervous, but her heart beat louder than she allowed her face to show. This meeting mattered more than she could explain in words. Behind the glass doors, Richard Thompson stood near a panoramic window, his back to the room. The city stretched beneath him, obedient and small. At 52, Thompson had the posture of a man accustomed to being listened to. His tailored charcoal suit fit like armor. He was not cruel looking. Not cold. He simply carried the quiet confidence of someone who had rarely been told no, and had never needed to explain himself. "Next," he said without turning. The assistant opened the door. "Alicia Lewis is here, sir." Thompson turned, glanced briefly at the digital schedule on the wall. 10 minutes, he said. "I have a board call at the quarter hour." Alicia stood when she was called. She smoothed her dress once, not from insecurity but habit, and followed the assistant into the room. The door closed softly behind her. Thompson did not offer his hand. He gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. "Please," he said, already sitting. Alicia waited until he looked up before speaking. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Thompson." He nodded, eyes scanning her folder rather than her face. "You're requesting emergency educational and medical assistance," he said, tone neutral. "Single parent. One dependent. STEM scholarship applicant. No current institutional affiliation." "Yes," Alicia said. "That's correct." He leaned back slightly. "You're aware the foundation receives over 8,000 applications a year." "I am." "And that we prioritize candidates with demonstrated institutional backing." "I understand." He studied her then. Not unkindly. Not warmly. The way one examines a variable. "And yet you still came." Alicia met his gaze. "Yes." There was a pause. Not an uncomfortable one. Just long enough to feel deliberate. "Tell me," Thompson said, "why you believe your case warrants exception." Alicia inhaled quietly. "My son is 8, she said. "His name is Marcus. He has a congenital heart condition that requires surgery within the year. I've exhausted my insurance coverage. I work full-time. I maintain a 3.9 GPA in a biomedical engineering program I attend at night. I'm not asking for charity. I am asking for consideration." Thompson's expression remained composed. "And your prior employment?" he asked. "I was a research associate," Alicia said, "before Marcus was born. And now, I clean offices overnight." The silence that followed was subtle, but heavy. Thompson's jaw tightened slightly. "I see," he said. His eyes dropped to the folder again. "Ms. Lewis," he said, "the foundation is committed to impact, to scalability, to outcomes that justify investment." Alicia nodded once. "I understand metrics," she said. "I used to build them." He glanced up, surprised despite himself. "Did you?" "Yes." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, not amused but skeptical. "Be that as it may," he said, "we can't operate on potential alone." Alicia leaned forward slightly. "I'm not potential," she said. "I'm proven. I just don't look like it anymore." The words landed softly. Too softly. Thompson exhaled. "Ms. Lewis," he said, voice firm but not raised, "many people come through those doors with compelling stories. If we helped everyone who deserved it, we'd have nothing left to give." Alicia's hands tightened on her folder. "I'm not everyone. I'm sure you believe that." The air shifted. The assistant outside glanced in through the glass. Thompson checked his watch. "I'm afraid we'll have to conclude," he said. "Your application will remain on file." Alicia stood slowly. "May I ask one thing?" she said. He hesitated, then nodded. "If my qualifications were presented without my name, would the outcome be the same?" Thompson didn't answer immediately. Then, "Yes," he said. "The foundation must remain objective." Alicia held his gaze for a moment longer than protocol allowed. "Thank you for your time," she said quietly. She turned and walked out. The door closed behind her. Inside the office, Harrington exhaled and reached for his tablet. "Next," he said. He did not see the assistant's expression. He did not see the woman outside the glass standing still, not crying, not shaking, just breathing through something heavy. And he did not know that the file he had dismissed would soon return to his desk. Alicia rode the elevator down in silence. 34 floors. Each one passed like a thought she refused to indulge. She stepped onto the street, the noise of the city rushing back in, and checked her phone. No new messages. She texted her sister anyway. "Meeting's over. I'm coming to get Marcus." She slipped the phone back into her bag and walked. That night, Alicia cleaned offices until her arms ached. She scrubbed glass walls that reflected executives she would never meet. Empty trash bins filled with half-eaten catered lunches. Straightened chairs beneath portraits of founders whose names were engraved in gold. She worked with precision, because precision had once been her language. In another building across town, a young analyst named Daniel Reed sat at his desk, reviewing grant applications flagged for secondary review. He frowned. One file had been reopened by the system. Lewis Alicia. He clicked. Her academic transcripts loaded first. His brows lifted. Then her employment history. He leaned forward. Wait, he murmured. He scrolled. Her research publications were listed, but inactive. Patents referenced, but not fully attached. Daniel pulled up the archive database and froze. Why is this here? He whispered. Across the city, Alicia tucked Marcus into bed, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead as his breathing evened out. You're going to be okay, she whispered. She said it like a promise. She didn't know who she was promising. The next morning, Richard Thompson reviewed his calendar. Board call, donor luncheon, media briefing, then a note from his chief legal officer. Urgent. Please review attached file. He frowned. Thompson disliked urgency. He opened the attachment. Applicant, Alicia Lewis. His eyes narrowed. Why was this back? He scrolled. And then, he stopped. The name under previous research affiliations caught his eye. Slowly he leaned forward. Because he recognized it. Very clearly. And for the first time since the meeting the day before, Richard Thompson felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Not anger. Not irritation. But recognition. The office felt smaller suddenly. The city outside blurred. Thompson stared at the screen, rereading the line he had dismissed too easily. The name. The institution. The project. The one he had built his foundation on. The one that had made his fortune possible. And beneath it, her signature. He whispered her name. Not as a dismissal this time, but as a question. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with noise or confrontation. Sometimes it waits patiently for the truth to be read aloud. The file did not close. Richard Thompson sat motionless at his desk, the city beyond the glass no longer commanding his attention. The Thompson Foundation headquarters, once a place of certainty, felt strangely quiet as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. On the screen before him, a single line glowed brighter than the rest. Contributor, Lewis Alicia. Project, Cardiosin Adaptive Valve Model, Prototype Phase. Thompson blinked once, then again. He scrolled slowly, deliberately, as if speed might shatter whatever fragile clarity was forming. The Cardiosin project was not obscure. It was the Foundation's origin story, the innovation that had transformed a mid-sized medical venture into a philanthropic empire. The adaptive valve system had revolutionized pediatric cardiac surgery. It was cited in journals, taught in universities, praised in speeches Thompson himself had given on stages around the world. He knew the names associated with it, or at least he thought he did. Thompson leaned back in his chair. That can't be right, he murmured. He tapped the intercom. Daniel, he said. Come in. Daniel Reed entered cautiously, tablet tucked to his chest. He was young but sharp. The kind of analyst who noticed margins others skimmed past. You flagged this file, Thompson said, gesturing to the screen. Yes, sir. Explain. Daniel swallowed. The system reopened it after cross-referencing inactive research patents, he said. Her name kept appearing in legacy documents. At first, I assumed it was an error. And now I'm not sure how her contribution was minimized. Thompson's jaw tightened. Minimized, he repeated. Daniel hesitated, then continued. Ms. Lewis was listed as a secondary research associate, he said. But the lab notes tell a different story. The adaptive algorithm, the one that allows the valve to adjust in real time to pediatric heart growth, that was hers. Thompson felt a dull pressure behind his eyes. No, he said. That algorithm was developed internally. Daniel turned his tablet around. Sir, it wasn't. The documents scrolled past. Handwritten annotations, timestamp simulations, internal emails. At the bottom of one scanned page, a signature. Lewis. Thompson stared at it. The same woman. The same calm voice from the day before. The same woman he had dismissed in 10 minutes. Outside the office, assistants moved quietly, unaware that something had shifted. Something invisible but irreversible. That evening, Alicia Lewis sat beside her son's hospital bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. Marcus slept lightly, a monitor humming beside him like a fragile promise. She traced a finger along the edge of the blanket. She had not told him about the meeting. Children didn't need the weight of adult disappointment. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. This is Alicia Lewis. Ms. Lewis, a woman's voice said. Professional and careful. This is Dr. Elaine Porter from the Thompson Foundation. I'm calling regarding your application. Alicia closed her eyes briefly. Yes. There's been a request for clarification on your prior research history. Pause. Would you be available to come in tomorrow? Alicia looked at Marcus. I work nights, she said. But I can make time. We would to his left. A single file lay over Lewis. We need to be precise, the legal officer said. If her contributions were understated, not misconduct. And if they were deliberately buried? Thompson asked. The room shifted. No one answered immediately. Daniel sat quietly near the end of the table, watching men and women with seven-figure salaries choose their words like chess pieces. There's also the matter of optics, communications said. Reopening a case like this could raise questions. About what? Thompson asked. About who gets credit, she replied carefully. And who didn't. Thompson looked down at the file again. He remembered Alicia's posture. Her restraint. The way she had said, I'm proven. I just don't look like it anymore. He exhaled. Bring her in, he said. Personally, Alicia returned to the same chair. Same room. Same glass walls. Different air. This time, Tom, she said. The words landed softly. Too softly for comfort. You assumed? He asked. I hoped, she corrected. But I assumed the system would eventually notice the inconsistencies. The room was silent. You didn't mention this yesterday, Thompson said. You didn't ask, Alicia replied. There was no accusation in her tone. Just facts. Thompson felt something shift in his chest. Not guilt, not yet, but respect edged with unease. Why leave? He asked. Alicia's gaze lowered briefly. My son was born premature, she said. The lab didn't have parental leave. I was told my absence would slow the project. She looked back up. So I stepped away. The irony was unbearable. The room knew it. Thompson swallowed. And the patents? Legal asked. Filed? Alicia said. Then reassigned. By whom? Alicia hesitated. Who stayed? No one pressed further. They didn't need to. Thompson stood slowly. Ms. Lewis, he said, the Foundation owes you an explanation. Alicia shook her head gently. No, she said. You owe my son a future. The words were not sharp. They were devastating. Thompson nodded once. We will review everything, he said. Immediately. Alicia gathered her folder. I didn't come back for recognition, she said. I came back because time matters. She turned to leave. At the door she paused. Mr. Thompson? Yes. You told me yesterday that if my qualifications were presented without my name, the outcome would be the same. She met his eyes. You were wrong. She left the room. Thompson remained standing long after the door closed. Daniel looked at him. Sir, he said quietly, there's something else. Thompson turned. The original funding proposal, Daniel continued, the one investors signed off on. He hesitated. It lists Alicia Lewis as lead architect. Thompson's breath caught. Because if that was true, everything the Thompson Foundation stood on would need to be re-examined. Sometimes the most dangerous truth isn't what was done erased to make it possible. The room did not erupt. That was signed 12 years ago. Daniel did. The document filled the screen at the front of the room. Alicia M. Lewis, MSc. Thompson felt something fracture. Not loudly. By whom? Thompson asked. That's what we'll need to determine. Communications shifted in her seat. Richard, she said, dropping the formality for the first time, we need to consider exposure. If this becomes public. When? Thompson corrected. She paused. When, she conceded, the Foundation's credibility could take a significant hit. Daniel looked up. With respect, he said, it already has. Just not where donors can see it yet. Thompson studied. Ms. Lewis, he said, the Foundation owes you an explanation. Alicia shook her head gently. No, she said. You owe my son a future. The words were not sharp. They were devastating. Thompson nodded once. We will review everything, he said. Immediately. Alicia gathered her folder. I didn't come back for recognition, she said. I came back because time matters. She turned to leave. At the door she paused. Mr. Thompson? Yes. You told me yesterday that if my qualifications were presented without my name, the outcome would be the same. She met his eyes. You were wrong. She left the room. Thompson remained standing long after the door closed. Daniel looked at him. "Sir," he said quietly, "there's something else." Thompson turned. "The original funding proposal," Daniel continued, "the one investors signed off on." He hesitated. "It lists Alicia Lewis as lead architect." Thompson's breath caught. Because if that was true, everything the Thompson Foundation stood on would need to be re-examined. Sometimes the most dangerous truth isn't what was done, but who was erased to make it possible. The room did not erupt. That was what unsettled Richard Thompson most. No gasps. No raised voices. No scrambling to deny what had just been spoken. Just silence. The kind of silence that arrives when truth is no longer abstract. Daniel Reed stood rigid at the end of the table, tablet still raised like evidence in a trial no one had prepared for. "The original funding proposal," he repeated quietly, "lists Alicia Lewis as lead architect." Richard Thompson did not sit. He couldn't. His hands rested on the polished table, knuckles whitening, as if the surface were the only thing anchoring him to the present moment. "That proposal," Thompson said slowly, "was signed 12 years ago." "Yes, sir." "And reviewed by legal, compliance, and the board." "Yes." Thompson closed his eyes. The Thompson Foundation had been built on that document. On its promise. On the innovation it claimed to champion. And now, "Pull it up," he said. Daniel did. The document filled the screen at the front of the room. Clean, formal, and prestigious. And there it was. Lead architect, Alicia M. Lewis, MSc. Thompson felt something fracture, not loudly but
Take on the
deeply,
worry this one.
because this was no longer a question of overlooked talent. This was erasure. The legal counsel spoke first. "If this is accurate," she said carefully, "then attribution was altered during later filings." "By whom?" Thompson asked. "That's what we'll need to determine." Communications shifted in her seat. "Richard," she said, dropping the formality for the first time, "we need to consider exposure. If this becomes public." "When?" Thompson corrected. She paused. "When," she conceded, "the Foundation's credibility could take a significant hit." Daniel looked up. "With respect," he said, "it already has. Just not where donors can see it yet." Thompson studied him. "How long have you known?" he asked. Daniel hesitated. "Long enough to realize," he said, "that the system didn't fail her. People did." No one argued. Because they all knew the truth when it stared back at them from the screen. Thompson straightened. "Get me everything," he said. "Internal emails. Lab notes. Patent drafts. Every version of that proposal." He turned to legal. "And I want an independent audit." The room stiffened. "That would invite scrutiny," legal said. "Yes," Thompson replied. "That's the point." Alicia did not leave the Foundation with triumph. She left with gravity. She stopped at the hospital pharmacy before heading home, her coat pulled tight against the cold. The clerk handed her a paper bag with medications that came with more warnings than reassurance. At home, she warmed leftover soup and sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. She had not expected them to move so quickly. Institutions rarely did. Her phone buzzed again. This time a text. "Unknown number. Ms. Lewis, this is Richard Thompson. I would like to speak with you privately. Please." Alicia read it twice, then once more. She placed the phone face down on the table. She had learned, through years of being unheard, that urgency often favored the powerful. She would not rush. "By forward. Are you suggesting misconduct?" "I am stating it." Another voice. "Then why wasn't this discovered sooner?" Thompson held their gaze. "Because the system did not look for it." Silence. "And because," he added, "no one expected her to still be here to claim it." That landed hard. By afternoon, Daniel Reed had found what he feared most. An internal email chain. 12 years old. Subject line, "Reallocation of credit, final review." Names appeared. Senior researchers. Department heads. A legal advisor who had since retired. One line stood out. "Lewis's contributions are significant, but continuity of leadership is essential for investor confidence." Daniel felt sick. He forwarded the chain to Thompson. 5 minutes later, Thompson stood in the doorway. "Where did you find this?" "In the archive," Daniel said. "Unindexed." Thompson exhaled. "They buried it." "Yes. On purpose." Daniel nodded. "They didn't think she'd ever come back." That evening, Alicia sat beside Marcus, helping him with homework. "Mom," he said softly, "are we okay?" She smiled. "We're getting there." Her phone rang. She answered this time. "Ms. Lewis," Thompson said, his voice different now, less assured, more human. "I owe you an apology." Alicia listened. "For what was taken," he continued, "and for how I spoke to you." She said nothing. "I want to make this right," he said, publicly, fully. Alicia closed her eyes. "Richard," she said, using his first name for the first time, "do you know what happens when institutions admit fault?" He hesitated. "They change," he said. "No," she replied gently. "They resist." She paused. "And they ask the injured party to carry the weight of their redemption." Thompson swallowed. "What do you want?" he asked. Alicia looked at her son. "Time," she said. "And truth." The next morning, a journalist emailed the foundation. "We've received information regarding misattribution in the Cardiocin project." Comment? Communications froze. Legal panicked. The board fractured. Thompson stood alone in his office, city stretching beneath him once more. This time it did not feel obedient. It felt watchful. He typed a response, then deleted it. He thought of Alicia's restraint, her refusal to weaponize the truth, and he understood something then. Justice was not about control. It was about courage. At noon, the foundation scheduled a press conference. Internal and external. It was unavoidable. Alicia Lewis arrived with Marcus beside her. Cameras waited. Reporters murmured. Thompson stepped to the podium. He looked out at the room, at the woman he had dismissed, at the institution he had inherited. And just as he opened his mouth to speak, a legal aide rushed forward, whispering urgently. Thompson's face changed. "What?" he said quietly. The aide swallowed. "One of the original signatories," she said, "has filed an injunction." The room stirred. "To block disclosure," she added. Thompson looked at Alicia, at Marcus, at the cameras now fully alert, and he realized the truth was about to be tested. Some battles aren't fought between right and wrong, but between truth and fear, when both finally demand to be seen. The injunction landed like a hand over the mouth of truth. Richard Thompson stood frozen at the podium, the low hum of reporters sharpening into anticipation. Cameras adjusted. Red lights blinked on. The room could feel it. Something had gone wrong. Across the aisle, Alicia Lewis felt it too. She placed her hand gently on Marcus's shoulder. He looked up at her, confused but calm. "Mom," he whispered. "I'm here," she said softly. That was all she promised. Behind the scenes, the legal aide spoke quickly and urgently. "They're claiming disclosure would violate proprietary protections," she said. "They're threatening immediate litigation if you proceed." Thompson looked back at the room, at the foundation's banner, at the people who believed this moment would be controlled, at Alicia. And in that instant, something fundamental shifted inside him. Because silence was no longer neutral. It was violence wearing a suit. Thompson stepped back to the microphone. He did not ask for more time. He did not defer. He looked directly into the cameras. "There has been an attempt," he said evenly, "to prevent this foundation from speaking openly today." A ripple moved through the room. "An injunction has been filed," he continued, "to protect interests that predate my leadership." Legal stiffened. Communications paled. Alicia did not move. "But," Thompson said, "I will not allow procedural fear to override moral obligation." Gasped. He turned slightly. "Ms. Lewis," he said, voice steady, "this moment belongs to you. With or without this institution." Alicia felt the weight of the room settle onto her shoulders. She had spent years carrying invisible weight. This was different. She rose slowly. Alicia stepped forward. No script. No notes. Just truth. "My name is Alicia Lewis," she said. "I am a biomedical engineer. A single mother. And for a long time, I was invisible." The room stilled. 12 years ago, I helped design a pediatric cardiac innovation that saved thousands of lives. I was young. I was new. I was told my work mattered, but that my presence complicated things. She paused. So I stepped back. Her voice did not tremble. I was erased quietly, professionally and legally. And when I needed help most, when my son's life depended on the very technology one helped create, I was told I was asking for too much. A murmur spread. She looked at Marcus. Then back to the room. I didn't come here for revenge, she said. I came here because systems don't change unless truth interrupts them. She stepped away from the microphone, and for a moment no one breathed. A reporter raised a hand. Ms. Lewis, she asked, are you saying the Thompson Foundation knowingly benefited from stolen work? Alicia did not answer. Richard Thompson did. Yes, he said. It did. The word hung in the air. Unavoidable. He continued. And today that ends. The injunction no longer mattered, because truth had already crossed the threshold. Phones buzzed. Emails flew. Outside the building, social media ignited. The story moved faster than suppression ever could. The fallout was immediate and measured. An independent audit confirmed Alicia's authorship. Patents were amended. Public credit reassigned. Financial restitution approved. The board restructured. 2 senior advisors resigned quietly. Not dragged. Not shamed. Removed. The Thompson Foundation issued a public apology, not crafted by legal but written plainly. Richard Thompson stepped down as chairman. Not in disgrace. In accountability. He stayed long enough to oversee reforms. Then he left. Alicia never asked him tea. Months later, sunlight poured through a different building. A hospital wing. Newly dedicated. The Alicia Lewis Pediatric Innovation Center. Alicia stood beside Marcus, watching children move through hallways filled with color and possibility. She did not smile widely. She smiled deeply. Richard Thompson attended quietly, seated in the back. When their eyes met, he nodded. She returned it. That was enough. That evening, Alicia tucked Marcus into bed. Mom, he asked, did you win? She brushed his hair back gently. No, she said. We changed something. What? She thought for a moment. The story people tell about who matters. He smiled sleepily. That's good. Yes, she whispered. It is. Because dignity doesn't demand permission, and truth, once spoken, never asks to be forgot. Have you ever been overlooked or underestimated because of how you were perceived? What would justice look like in your own story? Let us know in the comments. Your voice matters. Thank you for watching. And please remember to like and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this. Your support makes these stories possible. That was enough. That evening, Alicia tucked Marcus into bed. Mom, he asked, did you win? She brushed his hair back gently. No, she said. We changed something. What? She thought for a moment. The story people tell about who matters. He smiled sleepily. That's good. Yes, she whispered. It is. Because dignity doesn't demand permission, and truth, once spoken, never asks to be forgot. Have you ever been overlooked or underestimated because of how you were perceived? What would justice look like in your own story? Let us know in the comments. Your voice matters. Thank you for watching. And please remember to like and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this. Your support makes these stories possible. That evening, Alicia tucked Marcus into bed. Mom, he asked, did you win? She brushed his hair back gently. No, she said. We changed something. She thought for a moment. The story people tell about who matters. He smiled sleepily. That's good. Yes, she whispered. It is. Because dignity doesn't demand permission, and truth, once spoken, never asks to be forgot. Have you ever been overlooked or underestimated because of how you... What would justice look like? Let us know in the comments. Your voice matters. Thank you for watching. And please remember to like and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this. Your support makes these stories possible. She paid for first-class comfort. She demanded silence. And she believed the girl beside her had no right to be there. At 30,000 feet, in a cabin full of witnesses, a rich woman raised her voice, not because she was threatened, but because she felt entitled. She didn't know the black girl she humiliated had spent her childhood listening to engines instead of lullabies. She didn't know the calm in her voice came from years of being tested under pressure. And she definitely didn't know that the pilot was already listening. Because minutes later, a single announcement would freeze the entire cabin. It would expose assumptions, unmask quiet brilliance, and turn a moment of cruelty into a reckoning that followed them long after the plane touched down. Welcome to Black Stories Hub. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for the support. Stay tuned for daily stories that echo beyond words, and don't forget to subscribe. The airport terminal. She paid for first-class comfort. She demanded silence. And she believed she paid for first-class comfort. She demanded silence. And she believed the girl beside her had no right to be there. At 30,000 feet, in a cabin full of witnesses, a rich woman raised her voice, not because she was threatened, but because she felt entitled. She didn't know the black girl she humiliated had spent her childhood listening to engines instead of lullabies. She didn't know the calm in her voice came from years of being tested under pressure. And she definitely didn't know that the pilot was already listening. Because minutes later, a single announcement would freeze the entire cabin. It would expose assumptions, unmask quiet brilliance, and turn a moment of cruelty into a reckoning that followed them long after the plane touched down. Welcome to Black Stories Hub. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for the support. Stay tuned for daily stories that echo beyond words, and don't forget to subscribe. The airport terminal shimmered with polished floors and muted luxury. Glass walls reflected first-class lounges, designer handbags, and people who moved with the confidence of those accustomed to being accommodated. Flight Aurelian 782, bound for Paris, was boarding. Business class filled first. Soft voices, champagne flutes, curtain privacy. Near the rear of the cabin, in economy, Naomi Brooks stepped carefully down the aisle, her small carry-on brushing her ankle. She was 19, slim, calm, dressed plainly in a navy sweater and jeans that had been ironed with care. Her natural curls were tied back neatly, as if she'd rehearsed the look in the mirror until it felt right. She found her seat by the window, 32A, and sat down quietly. Naomi didn't fidget, didn't sigh, didn't complain. She folded her hands in her lap the way her mother taught her when she was nervous. This flight mattered. It wasn't a vacation. It wasn't a luxury. It was a scholarship interview. A final evaluation. A chance she had worked toward since she was 13. Across the aisle, Margaret Whitcomb adjusted herself into 32B with irritation already etched into her posture. She was in her late 40s, impeccably dressed, her scarf perfectly arranged, her handbag costing more than Naomi's entire outfit combined. Margaret believed strongly in order, in hierarchy, in knowing who belonged where. She glanced at Naomi once, then again. Her lips tightened. She pressed the call button. A flight attendant leaned down. "Yes, ma'am?" Margaret lowered her voice, though not enough. "I specifically requested not to sit next to oi distractions." The attendant followed her gaze, met Naomi's eyes briefly, then smiled politely. "I'm sorry, ma'am. The flight is full." Margaret sighed sharply, as if burdened by incompetence. She leaned back, folded her arms. Naomi stared out the window, pretending not to hear. She had learned long ago that dignity was sometimes silence. The plane taxied. Seatbelts clicked. Overhead bins closed. And Margaret's patience unraveled. As Naomi adjusted her seatbelt, her elbow brushed Margaret's sleeve, barely a touch. Margaret recoiled. "Excuse you," she snapped, loud enough for 3 rows to hear. Naomi turned immediately. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean." Margaret cut her off. "You people are always so careless. No awareness. No boundaries." The word hung in the air. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some stared at their phones. Others looked away. Naomi's face flushed, not with anger but with the familiar ache of being reduced. "I really am sorry," she said softly. Margaret scoffed. "Of course you..."
Passengers shifted uncomfortably. Naomi's face flushed, not with anger, but reduced. "I really am sorry," she said softly. Margaret's phone. Of course you
Not raise her voice. She did not leave. She stayed. and that, somehow, seemed to offend Margaret even more. "You should be grateful," Margaret continued, gesturing vaguely. "Opportunities like this aren't meant for everyone." The flight attendant intervened firmly now. "Ma'am, that's enough." Margaret leaned back, victorious. But the damage was done. The cabin had shifted. Something uncomfortable had been exposed. And Naomi sat very still, staring at the seat back in front of her, reminding herself why she was here. As the plane lifted into the sky, Naomi closed her eyes. The hum of the engines carried her backward, not to anger but to memory. Her mother at the kitchen table, textbooks spread wide. "Don't let them tell you who you are," she'd said. "Let your work speak." Her father's old flight jacket, folded carefully in a drawer. The smell of jet fuel clinging faintly to the fabric. Naomi had grown up near runways. She knew planes the way some people knew prayer. She noticed details others ignored. The slight delay in engine sync. The off. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man in a pilot's uniform, traveling off-duty, glanced up from his book and studied Naomi curiously. Not because of what Margaret had said, but because Naomi was listening. Really listening. Her eyes tracked the pitch of the aircraft. Her fingers tapped softly, not nervously but rhythmically, like someone trained. The man frowned slightly. Up front, Margaret reclined her seat with satisfaction, already recounting the incident in her head. Her version, of course. She had no idea that the assumptions she'd made were about to collapse. Because 30 minutes into the flight, the turbulence began. And Naomi's calm did not waver. The plane jolted. Gasps rippled through the cabin. The seatbelt sign chimed on. Margaret gripped her armrests. "This airline is ridiculous," she muttered. Naomi inhaled slowly. Counted. Listen. The turbulence pattern wasn't random. It was structural. She leaned slightly into the aisle and caught the flight attendant's eye. "Excuse me," Naomi said quietly. "Could you tell the cockpit there's asymmetric vibration in the left engine?" The attendant blinked. "I'm sorry?" Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't insist. "I might be wrong," she said, "but it feels like a compressor imbalance." The off-duty pilot across the aisle looked up sharply now. "Did you say compressor imbalance?" Naomi met his eyes for the first time. "Yes, sir." Margaret laughed nervously. "Oh, please. Now she's an engineer too." The pilot stood. "I think we should inform the cockpit." The flight attendant hesitated, then nodded. Minutes passed. The turbulence eased slightly. Then the cabin speakers clicked. And the captain's voice filled the plane. "Ladies and gentlemen," the pilot began, calm but deliberate. "This is your captain speaking." Margaret relaxed. Naomi closed her eyes. "We'd like to acknowledge a passenger in economy who brought a critical mechanical observation to our attention." A murmur rippled through the cabin. Margaret's head snapped up. Her insight helped us address an issue before it escalated. Pause. "For transparency," the captain continued, "she is not a student. She is not guessing." Another pause. "She is Naomi Brooks, daughter of the late Captain Daniel Brooks, and a licensed aerospace systems analyst currently under consideration for this airline's International Safety Board." Silence. Total. Absolute silence. Margaret's face drained of color. Naomi opened her eyes. And as the plane flew steadily forward, every assumption in that cabin shattered at once. But the captain wasn't finished speaking. And what he said next would change far more than one flight. Sometimes, the most dangerous turbulence isn't in the air. It's in the assumptions we make about the people sitting right beside us. Silence lingered long after the captain's announcement ended. Not the comfortable kind. The heavy kind. The kind that forces people to reevaluate what they thought they knew. Margaret Whitcomb sat frozen in her seat, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Around her, passengers shifted, whispered, craned their necks to look, not at the front of the plane but at row 32. At Naomi Brooks. The same young black girl Margaret had dismissed as careless, as unworthy, as someone who didn't belong. Naomi didn't look triumphant. She didn't look vindicated. She looked tired. The off-duty pilot across the aisle slowly sat back down, his expression unreadable but respectful. A woman 2 rows ahead turned fully around and offered Naomi a small, apologetic smile. Another passenger whispered, "Wow," under their breath. Margaret felt heat crawl up her neck. She wanted to speak, to say something, anything, to regain control of the narrative. But for the first time on that flight, she didn't know what words would work. The flight attendant returned, her tone noticeably different now. "Miss Brooks," she said gently, The captain would like to speak with you after landing if that's all right. Naomi nodded. Of course. No arrogance. No smugness. Just professionalism. Margaret stared at her, disbelief giving way to something else, something closer to fear. Because status only works when no one questions it. And Naomi had just done that, without trying. The remainder of the flight passed in uneasy quiet. Margaret couldn't relax. She replayed the moment again and again. The words she'd used, the look she'd thrown, the assumptions she'd made so casually. She had always believed herself to be reasonable, open-minded even, but reason felt thin now. Beside her, Naomi read through a thin folder of documents. Margaret caught a glimpse of diagrams, technical, complex. Not decorative. Not performative. Real work. At one point, Naomi noticed Margaret watching and closed the folder politely. Margaret flinched. She had expected confrontation. A comment. A glance heavy with judgment. But Naomi offered none. And that hurt more than any retaliation could have. Finally, Margaret cleared her throat. I didn't know, she said quietly, barely audible over the hum of the engines. Naomi looked at her. Not coldly. Not warmly. Just honestly. Most people don't, Naomi replied. That was all. Margaret swallowed. Because somehow, that simple sentence carried years of truth she had never bothered to confront. As the plane descended into Paris, the cabin buzzed again, but this time with subdued energy. People glanced at Naomi differently now. With curiosity. With respect. With a hint of shame. The wheels touched down smoothly. Applause broke out, brief, restrained. Margaret did not clap. She sat still, staring at the seat in front of her, while Naomi rose, retrieved her bag and waited patiently like everyone else. The captain emerged from the cockpit shortly after, speaking quietly with the crew. Then his eyes found Naomi. He smiled. Miss Brooks, he said loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, thank you again. We'll talk shortly. Margaret felt something sink deep in her chest. Because she suddenly understood, this was not a one-time moment. This was a crossroads. For Naomi, and for her. At the jet bridge, Naomi was gently asked to step aside. So was Margaret. Confused murmurs followed. A senior airline official approached, tablet in hand. Mrs. Whitcomb, he said, polite but firm, there has been a report filed regarding passenger conduct during this flight. Margaret's heart raced. I was upset, yes, she said quickly. But this is being blown out of proportion. The official didn't argue. We'll review the footage, he replied calmly. Naomi stood a few feet away, silent. Margaret looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something unsettling settle in. Naomi wasn't watching with satisfaction. She was watching with expectation. As if she had seen this moment before. As if she knew how systems worked, and how they corrected themselves, slowly and painfully. The official turned to Naomi. And Miss Brooks, the board would like to expedite your meeting. Naomi nodded again. Thank you. Margaret's breath caught. The board. The same airline she had bragged about supporting financially for years. The same institution she believed would always take her side. For the first time, Margaret wondered if influence had limits. As Naomi walked toward the private corridor leading to the airline offices, she paused. She turned back just once and looked at Margaret. Not with anger. Not with pity. But with something far more unsettling. Resolve. At the same moment, Margaret's phone vibrated. An email notification flashed across the screen. Subject, urgent, passenger conduct review, Whitcomb Holdings. Her throat tightened. Because whatever this was, it wasn't staying on the plane. And as Naomi disappeared behind the glass doors, Margaret realized the truth far too late. Some flights don't just take you across oceans. They take you straight into accountability. The private corridor was quiet, insulated from the noise of arriving passengers and rolling luggage. Naomi Brooks walked beside the airline official, her steps measured, her posture steady. She had walked halls like this before. Places where decisions were made quietly. Where reputations shifted without applause. Where truth mattered more than volume. Inside the conference room, a semicircle of executives waited. Men and women in tailored suits. Screens glowing softly. Coffee untouched. At the head of the table stood Captain Henri Laurent, the pilot who had made the announcement. Miss Brooks, he said warmly, thank you for agreeing to speak with us on such short notice. Naomi inclined her head. Thank you for listening. That word, listening, landed heavily. Laurent gestured for her to sit. We reviewed preliminary data, he continued. Your observation was precise. Too precise to be coincidence. Naomi clasped her hands loosely. My father taught me to trust patterns, she said, especially when others dismissed them. A pause followed. Then one executive spoke carefully. We'd like to formally invite you to consult on our international safety protocols. Naomi did not smile. She did not gasp. She simply nodded. I'd be honored, she replied. But as the room shifted into quiet approval, Naomi's gaze drifted, not toward celebration, but toward the glass wall separating the space from the terminal. Because she knew, accountability rarely ends where applause begins. Across the terminal, Margaret Whitcomb sat stiffly in a small office reserved for administrative follow-ups. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old carpet. She checked her phone again. No service. She had never noticed how powerless silence could feel. Finally, the airline official returned, not alone. With him was a woman Margaret recognized instantly. Elaine Moritz, board member, major donor. A woman whose approval Margaret had chased for years. Elaine's expression was neutral, professional. Margaret, she said, taking a seat across from her, I've reviewed the incident footage. Margaret leaned forward. Elaine, you know me. This was a misunderstanding. I was stressed. That girl? Elaine raised a hand. That woman, she corrected softly, is an aerospace analyst we've been trying to recruit for months. Margaret froze. Elaine continued, calm but unyielding. What concerns us isn't a single remark, she said. It's a pattern. Margaret's pulse quickened. A pattern of behavior that reflects on every institution you're associated with. Margaret laughed nervously. Surely this doesn't affect my standing? Elaine's gaze hardened. It already has. Silence pressed in. And for the first time, Margaret wondered whether the power she had relied on her entire life had been conditional all along. Later that evening, Naomi stood near the terminal exit, waiting for her ride. She checked her watch. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Miss Brooks, this is Elaine Moritz. I'd like to speak with you personally, if you're willing. Naomi read it twice, then looked up. Across the glass doors, Margaret stood just outside, phone pressed to her ear, her posture smaller than before. Not broken, but uncertain. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, time slowed. Naomi saw not an enemy, but a woman standing at the edge of something unfamiliar. Margaret lowered her phone slowly. She hesitated. Then, carefully, she stepped forward. Margaret stopped a few feet away. I owe you an apology, she said, voice unsteady. Not because of what happened on that plane, but because of how easily I believed I was entitled to treat you that way. Naomi listened. She did not interrupt. I don't expect forgiveness, Margaret added quickly. I just needed to say it. Naomi considered her. I appreciate the words, she replied. But accountability isn't a feeling. It's a process. Margaret nodded, swallowing. I understand. Did she? Naomi wasn't sure. Because growth wasn't proven by discomfort alone, but by what someone was willing to change once no one was watching. Margaret stepped back, unsure what else to say. As she turned away, her phone vibrated again. She looked down. Her breath caught. Subject, formal review outcome, Whitcomb Holdings. Her hands trembled. Across the terminal, Naomi watched silently. She didn't know what the message said, but she knew the weight of moments like this. Moments when systems decide who they will protect, and who they will finally hold accountable. Margaret opened the email. Her face drained of color. And just as she looked up, searching for something to hold on to, the airport lights dimmed briefly as a storm rolled in outside. Thunder echoed. And somewhere between justice and consequence, a decision had been made. But what that decision meant, for Margaret, for Naomi, and for everyone watching, had yet to be revealed. The storm outside had settled into a steady drizzle, casting a soft, gray light over the terminal. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with quiet anticipation. Margaret Whitcomb sat at the corner of the airport cafe, her phone still open, her fingers trembling slightly. The email she had received moments ago was more than a message. It was a turning point. She took a deep breath and read the letter again. It was from the airline's board. Subject, Outcome of Passenger Conduct Review, Whitcomb Holdings. The letter was clear. The board had decided on a formal review of Margaret's involvement in various partnerships. Her status as a major donor was now under scrutiny, and her future influence was uncertain. Margaret's heart raced as she realized the gravity of what this meant. It wasn't just about the incident on the flight, it was about the patterns of behavior that had been exposed. Across the terminal, Naomi Brooks stood near the exit, watching as passengers trickled out. Her phone buzzed too, but Naomi's message was different. It was an invitation from Elaine Moritz, offering a position on the airline's advisory board. As Naomi absorbed the news, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about ensuring that integrity and respect were at the every decision. Margaret walked toward Naomi, the weight of the moment heavy on her shoulders. She paused a few feet away, and for the first time, her voice carried genuine humility. "Naomi," Margaret began, her voice soft, "I want to thank you. You've shown me the importance of accountability. I'm committed to making things right." Naomi met her gaze, her expression calm and measured. "Thank you, Margaret. Change begins with recognition, and I believe we can both grow from this." There was a moment of silence, an understanding that transcended the initial conflict. Margaret's journey of self-reflection had led her to this point, a place of genuine change. As they spoke, Elaine Moritz approached them, her presence both reassuring and commanding. "Naomi," Elaine said warmly, "we're excited to have you join the advisory board. Your insights will be invaluable." Naomi nodded, grateful for the opportunity to contribute and to make a difference. Margaret looked on, a mixture of relief and determination in her eyes. She knew the path ahead would not be easy, but it would be meaningful. As the evening drew to a close, the airport's lights reflected the calm after the storm. Naomi and Margaret stood together, sharing a moment of quiet reflection. "The journey ahead," Naomi said, "is about more than just one flight or one incident. It's about building trust and creating a better future." Margaret nodded. "And it's about listening, truly listening, to those whose voices often go unheard." They walked toward the exit, side by side, a symbol of growth and mutual respect. The story of that flight, of turbulence, accountability, and transformation, had come full circle. In the end, true change is forged not in the absence of conflict, but in the courage to face it and rise above it, together. As we close the story, ask yourself, how often do we overlook the voices that challenge our assumptions? What steps can we take in our own lives to ensure accountability and respect? Are we willing to listen and learn even when it's uncomfortable? Because the real journey of growth begins when we are open to change and willing to embrace it. Thank you for watching. And please remember to like and subscribe to this channel for more stories like this. Your support makes stories like this possible.